Distinguida delegación.
Distinguished delegations, we shall now proceed with the interactive dialogue with the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Cambodia. It is my pleasure to welcome to the podium Ms. Rhona Smith, Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Cambodia. I invite Ms. Smith to present her report. Madam.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Good morning. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honour to present my second substantive report on the situation of human rights in Cambodia. I would like to record my humble appreciation to the Council for choosing to extend the mandate of the Special Rapporteur for 2 years in Resolution 3023. I would also like to record my gratitude to the Royal Government of Cambodia for its cordial support for my work, both in terms of the swift issuing of invitations to undertake formal visits and with scheduling of official meetings during my visits. In this oral statement, I primarily intend to update the Council on developments in Cambodia since May, given the radical developments since the report was submitted. As noted at paragraphs 44 to 49, Cambodia is in between elections. The local level Sangkat commune election on the 4th of June 2017 appears to have been orderly, with few irregularities requiring resolution by the National Election Committee. The voter registration programme went well, and some 90% of the electorate cast votes. This is positive and encouraging, given the general election is scheduled for the 29th of July 2018. However, the general situation leading up to and indeed after the election is alarming in a country which claims to be a pluralist, liberal democracy in accordance with the Constitution. There have been 2 particularly pertinent changes in the law on political parties, one in February permitting the dissolution of political parties without appeal, and one in July prohibiting a party from using voice messages, images, written documents or activities of a person convicted of a felony or misdemeanour. In the Cambodian context, these amendments disproportionately affect the political opposition actors. In practice, the fate of the political opposition appears to be in the hands of the executive. Since early August, the presidents of 3 opposition parties have been detained. The regular, violent rhetoric of government ministers and senior military officers creates fear, a barrier to free elections. The same is true of earlier rhetoric from other parties inciting hatred. As I have said before, with power comes responsibility, and regular threats and scaremongering has no place in a peaceful society such as Cambodia, which still bears the scars of its tragic past. Last year, I noted at paragraph 8 that without genuine conciliatory efforts on the part of the 2 main political parties to re-establish the culture of dialogue in an atmosphere of mutual respect, the situation of human rights in Cambodia could well deteriorate further in the months ahead. As I speak, the president of CNRP, the main opposition party in Cambodia, is in pre-trial detention, which was upheld by the Court of Appeal yesterday, on a charge of conspiracy with a foreign power, an act implying fomenting hostilities or acts of aggression against Cambodia. The government has publicly explained that the conspiracy arose from a speech made by His Excellency Kem Sokha, the president of that political party, in Australia in 2013, which is available online. Despite this, he was claimed to have been arrested in flagrante delicto, therefore obviating the normal processes for removing parliamentary immunity. He was detained in prison, CC3, before being charged and denied many of the legal rights in Cambodian law, including confidential access to his lawyers and the presence of his lawyers during questioning by the investigating judge. I call on the Government, Parliament and on the judiciary to take steps to ensure that the in flagrante delicto provisions are only used in situations which meet the normal definition of that term. This is the fourth time in 2 years that it has been used to arrest an opposition member of Parliament. Great care must also be taken to ensure that there is strong evidentiary base for any charges levied. At paragraph 54 of the current report, I note the disparate evidentiary standards used in courts, and I repeat the call for the standard of proof to be the same in all cases and for the Ministry of Justice to consider drafting guidelines on evidentiary requirements. Your Excellencies, Mr. President, the reported pressure on NGOs has been compounded over the last few months with the application of various provisions of the Law on Associations and Non-Governmental Organisations, known as LANGO. All NGOs are required to submit accounts to the Ministry of Interior this month, September. Many organisations have concerns over this, shared by trade unions submitting accounts to the Ministry of Labour. Regular activities of NGOs are also being affected. The Minister of Interior confirmed to me in August that he now requires civil society organisations to report all activities to the commune and district authorities, including education and training activities. Such reporting is not legally required by LANGO and also appears contrary to Cambodia's law on peaceful demonstrations and the associated ministry guidelines. Although the government claims that the reporting is to ensure the safety of NGO staff and facilitate their activities, it is understandable that NGOs consider this an intrusive form of monitoring and control. The application of the provision in LANGO that NGOs must be politically neutral is proving problematic when many activities deemed as critical of the government are considered to be political. A similar provision appears in the trade union law. In contemporary Cambodia, almost anything can be alleged political. Calls for respect for human rights and democracy are now branded as political manipulation and biased attacks against the government. The government should revert to the protection and encouragement of the vibrant civil society for which the country was known and rightly celebrated. Any restrictions on activities should only be as necessary in accordance with both Cambodian and international human rights laws. A related issue is the dramatic reduction in freedom of the media in Cambodia. Starting on the 21st of August 2017, just after I concluded my mission, several radio stations were shut down or had restrictions imposed. Radio is a major source of information in Cambodia, so any restriction in licensing or accessing to bandwidths inevitably limits the freedom of Cambodians to receive information. Earlier, on the 4th of August 2017, the Cambodia Daily newspaper was served with a tax reassessment indicating alleged arrears of some $6.3 million due within 30 days. No due process or negotiations followed. The paper's licence was not renewed and it published its final edition on the 4th of September this year, bringing to an end its 24 years of independent press reporting. During an election year, political debates and critiques, as well as access to various sources of information, are essential to ensure the electorate can fully understand the policies and goals of those they are being invited to elect. The range of laws employed to restrict criticism against the government and quell political debate continues to increase. Serious charges of secession, insurrection, forgery and treason have been used. with charges of defamation and incitement remaining common. On the evidence available, they seem to be applied inconsistently in a discriminatory manner. There are many dangers with a state being ruled by law rather than in accordance with the rule of law. The government, on its part, has publicly expressed concern over what it considers a campaign of disinformation, twisting historical facts and events in an attempt to create a negative image of Cambodia and blame the government. Indeed, His Excellency Kieran Mee elaborated on several aspects of the government view in his statement here this month, and His Excellency Prak Sokhonn likewise at the General Assembly last week. Government ministers have often reminded me of the necessity of preserving public order and stability. Whilst this is true, political debates and even criticism of the policies of the government and indeed opposition are a normal part of any democratic society. Yet, restrictions of the democratic space and undermining of democratic institutions have reached an unprecedented level in Cambodia's post-1993 history. Mr. President, Excellencies, in my report, prison overcrowding is noted. This year, the situation has deteriorated to dangerous levels. Due to the government's active campaign against drugs, some 10,000 individuals have been arrested and/or detained. Many remain in prisons, and I observed juveniles detained in the same cells as adult women. Other persons are held in drug rehabilitation or drop-in centres. As they are not permitted to leave such centres, these are, in human rights terms, places of detention. As such, there is work to be done to ensure their detention is regularly reviewed in accordance with law and not arbitrary. Of course, there is also a need for a holistic response to their treatment, rehabilitations and reintegration into society. On the subject of detention centres, I should also note that in August I was again refused permission to hold confidential meetings with detainees in 2 prisons, though I was given open access to drop-in and rehabilitation centres. Mr. President, Excellencies, turning now to formal communications sent to the Government over the last year and treaty body reporting. As per the footnote on page 7 of the report, the 4 staff members of Ad Hoc and the Deputy Secretary of the NEC were released under judicial supervision on the 29th of June. Whilst I welcome their conditional release, given they were detained for 427 days without significant progress in substantiating the charges against them, I call for the charges against them to be definitively dropped through non-suite orders in Article 247 of the Criminal Procedure Code. It is a violation of the right to be tried without undue delay for charges to linger indefinitely and be reactivated seemingly at random. The case of the activist Tip Bani is also in point. She is currently serving 2.5 years in prison, upheld on appeal in August 2017, for allegedly instigating violence at a demonstration in 2013. Anyone arrested and charged with an offence in accordance with the law has a right to trial without undue delay, according to Article 14(3)(c) of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Should insufficient evidence be available to bring the case to trial, the charges should be dropped and their records expunged completely. I welcome the commitment offered in August by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation to henceforth respond to communications and thereby engage in dialogue with the special procedures on issues of concern. I also welcome the commitment of the Cambodian Human Rights Committee to work on scheduling the submission of overdue UN treaty body reports and planning for the timely submission of reports thereafter. In spite of the foregoing, there have been some positive developments on matters raised in my written report, which were brought to my attention in August. The Ministry of Justice updated me on a number of areas in which progress is planned and confirmed an increase in his budget. The electronic criminal database is being rolled out, and the Ministry is also planning a comprehensive electronic case management system. All applicable court fees will now be displayed, and there is greater use of pre-trial detention forms. These are moves towards greater transparency in the justice system. I was also told of plans to work on raising awareness about judicial supervision as an alternative to pre-trial detention, a possible pilot project on promoting alternatives to custodial sentencing, and plans for alternative dispute resolution in certain appropriate cases. Whilst I welcome the willingness of the Ministry to begin awareness raising and embark on pilot programmes, it is notable that the support of OHCHR Cambodia is sought by the Minister for the first two programmes, rather than relying on Ministry resources. The plans for progressing the Sustainable Development Goals are still being prepared, and I look forward to working with the Government and their chosen development partners on this in the years ahead. Mr. President, Excellencies, as I noted in my end of mission statement in Cambodia last month, the country seems to be moving inexorably towards a precipice. Given the positive commitments to human rights expressed by many government ministers I met in August, and their willingness to recognise challenges faced, it is my fervent hope that Cambodia will retreat from the precipice it is teetering on. I undertake to continue monitoring the situation, including during my missions before and after the election. There can be no more threats of violence, quelling insurrections, inciting hatred, or racially inflammatory statements from any political party. So many have worked tirelessly in government and out with to ensure the peaceful transition of Cambodia from conflict and genocide to democracy in accordance with the constitution on which modern Cambodia is based. This path must continue, and the gains in human rights protection built by Cambodia since 1993 must be preserved, not undermined. It is what all Cambodians deserve. I pledge to support Cambodia in these endeavours and call on the Council and other states to support Cambodia in this quest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Smith. In accordance with our practice, we will start by listening to the delegation of the concerned country. So I hereby give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cambodia.
To begin, I wish to recall that Cambodia has attached great importance to the mandate of the Special Rapporteur since 1993. Since then, Cambodia has been in regular dialogue with 6 country Special Rapporteurs for a quarter of a century, during which all requested in situ visits and proposed meetings have been accepted, including those of Professor Ronald Smith. Today, I'd like to thank Professor Smith for the annual report considered at this Council. Despite therein very few encouraging recommendations and positive evaluation are highlighted, disregarded the reality and achievement made. Therefore, my delegation is of the view that the Special Rapporteur's cherry-picking approach in expecting for desired outcomes not only undermines my government's goodwill and commitment towards the special procedure mechanism, but also would pose serious risk to the credibility of the entire UN human rights system. Mr. President, Cambodia's recent past saw egregious crime and despicable human rights abuses, under which millions of lives perished, tormented the entire population. Thanks to the win-win policy of Prime Minister Samdech Hun Sen, this criminal enterprise was ended in 1998. This irreparable tragedy gets strong condemnation by the international community and the UN. As a result, the Khmer Rouge Tribunal was established, on which millions of dollars spent to trial those responsible for this monstrous crime. But unfortunately, once Professor Smith called this crime against humanity simply as, I quote, the trouble of the last century. Today, Cambodia witnessed economic growth of an average 7.7% over a period of more than 2 decades, and it is projected to be at 7.1% this year and the year after. And graduate from lower income to middle income country, poverty rate has declined from 53% in 2004 to 13.5% in 2014, ranking the countries as one of the best performing economies in the world. In addition, in June this year, communal elections, 7.8 out of 9.6 million eligible voters registered to cast their ballots, and the turnout was unprecedented high at 89.52%. But again, unfortunately, the Special Rapporteur negatively sees those outstanding performances merely as a glass half empty by extemporaneously stating that, I quote, the general situation of the country remains tense and Cambodia appears to be approaching a precipice. In other words, since 1993, this country has seated both country Special Rapporteur and the Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights. Last year, the government extended another 2-year term for the office, whereas the mandate of Special Rapporteur will also be extended for 2 more years. Cambodia is party to 8 out of 9 core international human rights instruments and has accepted 79.5% of the recommendation made at the second cycle of the UPR, reflecting the government's commitment to address the international community's concern. But to the contrary, based on selective and unverified sources, the Special Rapporteur construed that, I quote, Cambodia's situation is reaching a dangerous tipping point. Needless to say, political manipulation has been persistently conducted against my government, only to besmirch it at best. Irrespective of its sound performance and achievement, the politicization of the recent development, particularly the arrest of one parliamentarian, the closure of a handful of media, including one NGO, in accordance with law and regulation, is a good case in point. Therefore, for Cambodia, as history has shown, without peace, stability and development, democracy and human rights are just paper left on the bookshelf getting dust. However, I like to reiterate that Cambodia remains committed to cooperate and partner with all UN human rights mechanisms and relevant stakeholders to further promotion and protection of human rights, based on mutual respect and principle of non-interference as mentioned in the UN Charter and other international human rights instruments. I thank you, Mr. President.
I would now like to inform you that the list of speakers is closed. I would now like to ask interested delegations to ask questions of the Special Procedures Mandate holder and to make comments on her report. I would like to respectfully remind you that the maximum speaking time is 2 minutes for all. I now give the floor to the delegation of the European Union.
Gracias, Presidente. Thank you, Mr. President. The European Union thanks the Special Rapporteur, Rhona Smith, for her report on Cambodia. We recognize the government of Cambodia's ongoing engagement with the Special Rapporteur and other UN mechanisms, as also demonstrated by its support of the OHCHR field office in Phnom Penh. And we welcome that the local elections of June 4th, 2017 were generally peaceful with largely incident-free election campaigns. We concur with the Special Rapporteur's overall assessment that whilst there were signs of progress in some areas of human rights, these have recently been overshadowed by numerous human rights concerns and political tensions. The European Union is deeply concerned about the use of judicial proceedings against opposition politicians and NGO figures in ways that appear to be politically motivated, including the treason charges brought against opposition leader Kem Sokha, in apparent breach of his parliamentary immunity. We are also concerned about the closure of various media outlets and NGOs such as Cambodia Daily and the National Democratic Institute, and restrictions and intimidation against human rights defenders and activists. We call on the Cambodian authorities to take immediate steps to restore prospects for a free and fair election in 2018 by ensuring that all political parties, civil society and media organizations can freely carry out their legitimate roles without threats, fear or intimidation. We would like to ask the Special Rapporteur, given the actions that have taken place since your report was published, what prospects do you now see of there being free and fair national elections in 2018, and what more can this Council do to support respect for human rights in the build-up to the elections? I thank you. Gracias, Presidente.
The United States of America has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The United States expresses its appreciation for the report of the Special Rapporteur. We note the progress cited in the report, including on education and the rights of children, and with regard to continued economic development. However, the United States remains gravely concerned about the government of Cambodia's ongoing crackdown on opposition parties, independent media, and civil society. Events of late August and early September, including the politically motivated arrest and detention of opposition leader Kem Sokha, have underscored the need for continued attention by the Council. Furthermore, we are concerned about the arbitrary use of registration and tax regulations to intimidate, shut down, or expel civil society groups and independent media outlets, as reflected in the abrupt closures of the Cambodia Daily and Radio Free Asia, and the expulsion of the National Democratic Institute. We urge the government of Cambodia to immediately release Kem Sokha and to lift restrictions on independent media and civil society organizations so they can continue their important work in support of credible national elections in 2018. Madam Special Rapporteur, what have you observed regarding preparations for free and fair national elections in 2018, and what can the international community do to support them? Thank you.
The United Kingdom has the floor.
Mr. President, the United Kingdom supports the earlier EU statement and thanks the Special Rapporteur, Rhona Smith, for her report and her statement today, which raised many serious concerns. The UK remains greatly concerned about the human rights situation in Cambodia. We share the Special Rapporteur's concerns about the amendments to the law on political parties, and we urge the Government of Cambodia to ensure an environment conducive to the conduct of political activities by all political parties. We are deeply concerned about the use of judicial proceedings against opposition leader Kem Sokha and other opposition politicians and NGO figures in ways that appear to be politically motivated. Together with harsh restrictions on media outlets and NGOs, including the enforced closure of Cambodia Daily and the National Democratic Institute, these measures imperil multi-party democracy and free debate. The UK urges the Government of Cambodia to build on the encouraging progress we saw at Cambodia's nationwide elections just over 3 months ago by taking immediate steps to ensure that free, fair and credible elections take place in July 2018. A democratic environment in which human rights are respected helps to create a stable society and thriving economy and will aid investment in Cambodia. We encourage the Government of Cambodia to explore ways in which the international community can assist in implementing the Special Rapporteur's recommendations. The UK would like to ask the Special Rapporteur, given the threats and intimidation faced by human rights defenders in Cambodia and the essential role they play, how do you minimise the risk of reprisals for those you meet from civil society during your country visits? Thank you.
Ireland has the floor.
Ireland aligns itself with the statement of the European Union. Mr. President, Ireland would like to thank the Special Rapporteur for her report. Ireland is deeply concerned by the deterioration in civil society and democratic space in Cambodia, where NGO representatives, trade union members, journalists and human rights defenders still find themselves subject to threats and harassment, arrest, pre-trial detention and prosecution. The use of law and association and NGOs and other legal and administrative measures to monitor and limit the space for civil society is troubling. Ireland urges the Government of Cambodia to ensure civil society and other actors are free to operate without the threat of persecution. In the lead-up to the national elections in 2018, we are particularly concerned at the arrest of Kem Sokha in spite of his parliamentary immunity. We call on the government to uphold freedoms of expression and association and to enable political engagement in line with the relevant laws as well as the human rights obligations of Cambodia to take place. Ireland would be interested in hearing the Special Rapporteur's views on how recent developments in Cambodia have affected the space for civil society in the country. Thank you.
Human Rights Watch.
Human Rights Watch has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since the last resolution adopted on Cambodia, the civil and political rights environment has worsened significantly and, as we've heard today, further deteriorated since the Council heard the Special Rapporteur's previous report last September, culminating in the shuttering of the Cambodia Daily and the arrest of opposition leader Kem Sokha just before this session started. On June 29th, the 4 senior staff members of the Human Rights and Development Association, held in pre-trial detention for 427 days, were released on bail in the wake of sustained international pressure. Yet authorities are proceeding with their prosecution and they still face 5 to 10 years in prison. The Bongkak Lake activist Tep Vanny, who has spent over 1 year in prison, continues to be imprisoned. In July, Prime Minister Hun Sen ordered the Ministry of Interior to investigate 2 members of the Situation Room, a group of civil society organizations coordinating election monitoring, alleging that they violated the vague and undefined concept of political neutrality enshrined in the law on associations and non-governmental organizations. Almost all domestically broadcast media is now under government control. In August, orders were issued to close and revoke the license of Mahanakor Radio and its affiliates, which broadcast Voice of America and Radio Free Asia. Independent radio station Voice of Democracy was also closed. In August and September, authorities used the General Department of Taxation to intimidate and shut down civil society groups and independent media outlets, including the Cambodia Daily. The arrest of Kem Sokha, leader of the Cambodia National Rescue Party, on charges of treason, followed earlier politically motivated prosecutions of several other elected opposition leaders as part of an unprecedented surge in the detention of opposition supporters and civil society activists, with at least 35 documented cases since July 2015. The Cambodian government's actions amount to a comprehensive campaign of intimidation, violence, and misuse of legal mechanisms in the lead-up to next year's national election. In view of this campaign, pre-election reporting, followed by council discussion, should be a red line in the resolution currently under consideration. Thank you.
Asian Forum for Human
Rights and Development has the floor.
Mr. President, Forum Asia notes the report of the Special Rapporteur. We support the extension of her mandate and call on her to conduct 2 official visits to the country before the 2018 elections. We are concerned at unprecedented increase in attacks and restrictions on civil society, media and the opposition in the aftermath of the Commune Council elections in June. The government has adopted a series of repressive laws and amendments to existing laws and in recent months used its tax system to constrain civil society and media ahead of next year's general elections. In July, the Prime Minister ordered investigations into 2 members of the Election Monitoring Coalition Situation Room for failing to register under Lengo and allegedly violating political neutrality after they reported that the June commune elections were not free and fair. Several NGOs have also been targeted for alleged offences under the tax law. Concerns over shrinking democratic space ahead of the July 2018 general elections have been further heightened by intensified attacks on media. On 4 September, Cambodia Daily was forced to cease its operations following an arbitrary order from Cambodia's General Department of Taxation to pay $6.3 million in taxes and several public threats to prosecute its owner. Similarly, the government has effectively taken control of all domestic broadcast media with orders to close and revoke licenses of several radio stations, including independent radio station Voice of Democracy as well as Mahanakor Radio and its affiliates. The escalation in attacks have added to several outstanding concerns, including the continued detention of land rights defender Tep Vanny, the chilling effect created by the murder of political analyst Kem Lay and pending charges against 4 ad hoc staff and the Secretary General of National Elections Committee who were recently released on bail. The Council should act immediately and call for a reversal of the current deterioration and closely scrutinize the situation ahead of the 2018 general elections. Thank you.
International Commission
of Jurists has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The International Commission of Jurists welcomes the report of the Special Rapporteur and strongly supports the renewal of her mandate. Monitoring and action by the international community has seldom been more important for Cambodia since the Paris Peace Accords were signed in 1991. Civil society, independent media and the political opposition are under sustained attack in what appears to be a carefully orchestrated effort to silence dissenting voices in the lead-up to national elections in July 2018. Vague legal provision in, for instance, the law on association and non-governmental organization and the law on political parties are being weaponized to this end. Human rights defenders and others, including the Haddock Four, Nai Chakraya Teb Vani, An Vanak Dom Kandi, and the president of the opposition party, Kem Sokha, face criminal charges with all the hallmarks of being politically motivated. Prosecutors and judges lack independence and impartiality, and investigation routinely fall short of international standards, and as in the case of the killing of political commentator Kem Lay. Seeking to justify its action, Cambodia frequently invokes the principle of the rule of law. The ICJ, a global organization of judges and lawyers, has worked for the rule of law for more than 60 years. The rule of law doesn't simply mean that laws exist and are enforced, but requires, among other things, equal application of the law without discrimination, including due to political or other opinion, and ensuring that laws are only adopted and applied consistent with international human rights law. What is happening in Cambodia today has nothing to do with the rule of law. The ICJ would therefore ask the Special Rapporteur what further recommendations she has towards seeing the rule of law as properly understood truly reign in Cambodia. Thank you.
Lawyers' Rights Watch Canada has the floor.
Lawyers' Rights Watch Canada appreciates the Special Rapporteur's report, including remarks on the administration of justice. We share her concern about the pre-trial detention of lawyer Mr. Nai Chakraya and 4 other rights defenders for over a year, in contravention of conclusions of the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention that the detentions were arbitrary. While they were released in June, charges have not been dismissed. This case exemplifies injustices imposed by courts that do not operate independently from the executive. Establishing human rights and an independent judiciary are key obligations of the 1991 Paris Peace Agreements to end years of conflict and atrocities that destroyed millions of lives and all of Cambodia's institutions. Since then, Cambodia has ratified numerous human rights treaties, and its 1993 constitution incorporates international human rights and an independent judiciary. Despite these legal obligations and recommendations of UPRs, treaty bodies, and every representative and rapporteur since 1994, Cambodia has no independent courts. This enables Cambodia to continue and increase violations of its international human rights law obligations by creating and misapplying laws and procedures that restrict or criminalize legitimate, peaceful activities of political dissenters, civil society, rights defenders, and independent journalists. We share all concerns expressed in the draft resolution to renew the Special Rapporteur's mandate and ask all Council members to support it. We urge Cambodia to cooperate with all Special Procedures mandate holders and to institute a genuinely independent judiciary that will uphold protected rights to freedoms of peaceful expression, association, and assembly. Thank you, Mr. President.
International Federation of Human Rights Leagues has the floor.
Mr. President, Madam Special Rapporteur, FIDH thanks you for your updates. We condemn the Cambodian government's intensified crackdown on human rights defenders, activists, government critics, independent media, and members of the political opposition. We are now witnessing a full-on attack on Cambodian civil society, which is likely to continue in the months leading up to next year's general elections, scheduled for 29th of July 2018. Without the ability for Cambodian citizens to fully enjoy their rights to freedom of expression, peaceful assembly and association, there is no chance that next year's election will be credible, inclusive or participatory. Prime Minister Hun Sen's administration continues to rely on draconian laws, repressive government agencies and a judiciary that lacks independence from the executive branch to silence any expression of dissent. We call on the government to repeal the law on associations and NGOs and stop arbitrary arrests and prosecutions of activists, human rights defenders and government critics. All those currently detained, including land rights defender Thap Vani, must be immediately and unconditionally released. Cambodian civil society needs the support of the international community now more than ever. We urge the Council to renew the mandate of the Special Rapporteur for 2 more years and instruct her to provide an update on the human rights situation in Cambodia at its 38th regular session. If the human rights situation further deteriorates, the Council should also hold an urgent debate on Cambodia on its 37th regular session. I thank you.
Cedo la palabra.
I give the floor to Ms. Schmidt so that concluding remarks may be made.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for your comments and your questions. Given the constrictions of time, I stand willing to meet and liaise with all of the speakers hereafter as necessary to complete updates and to provide and exchange further information. I note the numerous requests for more regular updates and for greater monitoring reporting, and also the numerous requests and comments concerning technical assistance and cooperation for Cambodia. There have been many challenges with this mandate over the last 2 years, which the resolution provided for. An unexpected one has been the issue of capacity, and I think this is something which is obviously within the domain of the Human Rights Council and the States of the United Nations. As your Excellencies are aware, there are a number of incredibly dedicated and gifted staff in OHCHR, many of them in this room, but they are not the answer to everything concerning Cambodia. It's not their role. They can work and follow a number of programmes, but they are restrained by the budget, as everything is. And I have found problems with this over the years that is not their making. I have the benefit of an excellent country team with the Deputy Representative in Cambodia, the heads of the unit, fantastic staff with a huge amount of knowledge and skills, and a very full and comprehensive UN country team. I rely on them greatly, particularly with the issues concerning reprisals which was raised, and with regular updating and the gathering of information on Cambodia. However, again, they are limited by budget. Excellencies, many of your countries have restrictions in budgets, as indeed do many NGOs and civil society organisations. OHCHR performs incredible work with very little funding compared with other elements within the United Nations. During this crucial election period in Cambodia, when you wish to be regularly appraised of the situation on the ground, please do bear this in mind, which can preclude more regular visits by me to Cambodia. I'm restricted by the budget and what it permits. This mandate is, as you know, based on a resolution under item 10. Therefore, it is technical assistance and capacity building. Whilst Cambodia has developed rapidly economically and has greatly increased wealth compared to when the mandate was established as a special representative of the Secretary-General, it is for you, the States of the Council and the United Nations to determine what level of assistance can and should now be funded, and to what extent Cambodia should assume greater responsibility for protecting and promoting rights and freedoms in fulfilment of the treaty obligations it has voluntarily accepted. For elections to be free, full, credible, in accordance with international human rights law and indeed many aspects of the Constitution of Cambodia, it's necessary that the current voter registration system, which is reopened, continues, and that all those eligible to vote are able to vote irrespective of their particular disabilities, irrespective of their personal status. It should make no difference, or their political opinions. Also, there should be full information on what people are voting for. So there should be access to information, freedom of expression, association, assembly, voter education and awareness, so that they can understand what each political party stands for and wishes to be elected on. There must be free choice without any intimidation before the election, so from now on, and indeed threats after the election. Free elections demand those voting make a choice without threat, intimidation or possible violence as a consequence. I take note of His Excellency, the Cambodian Ambassador's comments. With respect to my summary that the country is teetering on a precipice and that the situation remains tense, I would stand by my comments, and I would, in support of those comments, also reference many comments made by Cambodian government ministers in the months preceding this session. There have been comments about people voting in the election having to prepare the coffins, about people being beaten with bamboo rods, possibilities of people with teeth being smashed, of blood in the streets. These, to me, irrespective of the comments by the government that they were educative in nature and not intimidation or threats, these are comments which indicate that in the government itself they feel the country is approaching the precipice to which I refer. If the government's comments were more neutral about stability and peace continuing in the country, perhaps there would be room for more negotiation on that fact. Your Excellencies, Mr. President, I would also comment that the references to children's rights I will be elaborating on in my report to the next Council session, so that's why I'm not elaborating on them in responses to the questions. I think it's a case that now the situation in Cambodia is such that decisions do have to be made in the Council as to what support can be available for the government and what support is appropriate to provide and what should be done by the government and verified in order to ensure the full and free enjoyment of all human rights and all fundamental freedoms in the country from now on, and including the credibility of the elections. In my opinion, the credibility of the elections is under threat at the moment because of the current environment, but I agree with the comments of many interlocutors that it is possible to retreat from the precipice, and it is still possible to advance an open environment in Cambodia for full and free elections. With respect to my future missions, I would hope to be able to have another mission this year in accordance with the normal funding requirements, and I am hopeful to have another visit before the elections take place. Should further updates be required, I am willing and able to undertake further missions if the budget allows, and equally with further reporting to the Council. I repeat my commitment to work with Cambodia and work with the development partners Cambodia chooses, and work with all other stakeholders in advancing the cause of human rights and freedoms in Cambodia. It is what Cambodians deserve and wish, and it is what, it's my understanding, most of the states in this room also wish for Cambodia, and I stand willing to serve in whatever way I can. Thank you.
Distinguished members of the delegations, we have concluded our interactive dialogue with the Special Rapporteur on the human rights situation in Cambodia. I wish to thank Ms. Rhona Smith for her presentation, and my thanks also to all participants for their contributions to our discussion. Distinguished delegates, given the
late arrival of His Excellency the President of the Central African Republic, I can inform you that we are hoping to see him at 12:30. We have now reached the end of our meeting for this morning. We will be having a short technical break at this stage and will then begin the interactive dialogue with the independent expert on Somalia. I hereby adjourn the meeting of the 36th session of the Human Rights Council. Thank you.
Yes.